My name is Christine Cole. I'm 32 years old, and I work as a financial analyst in Boise, Idaho. That day was supposed to be a warm and joyful Thanksgiving dinner, but instead, my parents handed me a special gift. Inside wasn't what I expected. It was a notice for my brother's $250,000 debt from a failed business venture. My dad glared at me and said, "You're going to pay this." I firmly refused. In an instant, he threw a glass of wine in my face, soaking my shirt. My mom screamed, "Get out." I stood frozen wine dripping down my chin, unable to believe this was my own family. If you were in that situation, would you stay silent and endure it or stand up for yourself? Share your thoughts in the comments. A week ago, I was packing my camping gear, ready for a weekend in Sawtooth National Forest. I've lived in Boise, Idaho for 6 years in a cozy apartment I bought with my own money. At 32, I'm a financial analyst, pulling in $180,000 a year, and I've worked hard to build a life I'm proud of. My place is small, but mine hardwood floors, a big window overlooking the city, and a quiet space where I can think. I don't need much, just my independence and a few good friends. That trip to Sawtooth was supposed to be a break, a chance to hike with my buddies, sleep under the stars, and forget the stress of quarterly reports. I'd been looking forward to it for weeks, mapping out trails, checking my tent for tears. Then my phone buzzed. A text from Mom popped up. "Come to Idaho Falls for Thanksgiving. We miss you." I froze, staring at the screen. I hadn't been back to my parents' house in 2 years, not since the last holiday, where my brother stole the spotlight as always. Growing up, I was the odd one out. My brother could do no wrong, captain of the football team, charming the golden child. I was the quiet one, studying late, saving every penny from summer jobs. Mom would say, "You're so responsible," but it never sounded like praise. It felt like a weight, like I was expected to carry everyone else's problems. I sat on my couch rereading her message. Memories flooded back, summers in Idaho Falls helping Mom in the kitchen, while my brother goofed off with Dad. We'd roll out dough for pies, laugh over old stories, and for a moment I'd feel like I belonged. Those moments were rare. Most of the time I was invisible, overshadowed by my brother's loud presence. The last time I visited, he bragged about some big real estate deal while Mom and Dad hung on his every word. I just smiled, nodded, and kept my thoughts to myself. I'd learned long ago that speaking up got me nowhere. Part of me wanted to ignore the text. I'd already booked the campsite, packed my tent, and told my friends I was in. But another part, the part that still craved a real family, couldn't let it go. What if this time was different? What if they actually wanted me there? Not just as a backup plan. I kept thinking about Mom's apple pie, the way she'd hug me when I walked in, how Dad used to tell bad jokes at the dinner table. Maybe I was too cynical. Maybe they really missed me. I called my friend Sarah to cancel. "You're ditching us for your family," she teased, but her voice had an edge. "They don't deserve you, Christine." I laughed it off, but her words stung. My friends know how my family is always expecting me to fix things, to be the responsible one. They've heard the stories, my brother's reckless spending, Mom and Dad's blind support for him. Still, I told myself this could be a chance to reconnect, to feel like part of something again. I texted Mom back, "I'll be there." She sent a heart emoji, and for a second I felt a flicker of warmth. But as I unpacked my camping gear, doubts crept in. Why now? They hadn't called or texted in months, not even for my birthday. My brother's name kept popping into my head. He was always the reason for these sudden invites. The last time I saw him, he hinted at financial trouble, but Dad brushed it off, saying, "He's got it under control." I didn't buy it. My brother's always been careless, spending money like it's endless. I pushed the thought away, telling myself I was overthinking. This was just a family dinner, right? A chance to sit around the table, share a meal, and maybe feel like I belonged. I started packing for Idaho Falls, 3 hours away, a straight drive down the highway. I picked out a nice sweater, something presentable but not too fancy. I wanted to show up as myself, not the perfect daughter they sometimes expected. As I folded my clothes, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Mom's text was too short, too formal, like it was rehearsed. My gut told me there was more to this invite, but I ignored it. I wanted to believe in that warm family moment, even if it felt like chasing a memory that might never have been real. I stopped in front of my parents' house, my heart racing as I stepped out of the car. The late November air was crisp, but I barely noticed my mind buzzing with a mix of hope and unease. I grabbed the gift bags from the backseat, wine for Dad, a silk scarf for Mom, and a finance book for my sister-in-law. I'd spent hours picking them out, wanting to show I cared, even if I wasn't sure they did. As I walked up the porch steps, the front door swung open and Dad's arms wrapped around me in a tight hug. "You made it," he said, his voice warm but louder than I remembered. Mom appeared behind him, taking my coat with a smile that felt a little too wide. "It's been too long," she said, guiding me inside. The house smelled of roasted turkey and cinnamon, pulling me back to childhood Thanksgivings. My brother and his wife were already in the living room, standing by the fireplace. My brother flashed his usual charming grin, the one that always got him out of trouble. "Hey, sis," he said, clapping my shoulder like we were old buddies. My sister-in-law nodded, her smile polite but distant, her eyes scanning me like she was sizing me up. I handed out the gifts, and they thanked me, Dad admiring the wine bottle, Mom wrapping the scarf around her neck. My sister-in-law flipping through the book with a quick thanks. It felt rehearsed, like they were playing parts in a script I hadn't read. We sat down to dinner, the table set with Mom's best dishes: golden turkey, mashed potatoes with gravy, and green beans sprinkled with almonds. It was the kind of spread that used to make me feel at home back when I was a kid, helping Mom set the table while my brother goofed off. I could almost hear Dad's old jokes, the ones that made me roll my eyes but secretly love. For a moment, I let myself believe we could have that again. I took a sip of wine, trying to relax, but my stomach twisted. Something was off. Their smiles were too bright, their questions too eager. Mom asked about my job, my apartment, my savings, things she never cared about before. "You're doing so well," she said, her tone almost probing. Dad nodded, too quick, like he was waiting for something. My brother dominated the conversation as always. He talked about his latest real estate deal, some big project that sounded too good to be true. "It's a game changer," he said, leaning back in his chair, arms crossed. My sister-in-law chimed in, praising his ambition, but her eyes kept darting to me. I forced a smile, nodding along, but my mind was racing. I remembered the last time I saw him, how he'd hinted at money troubles only for Dad to shut it down. Now his confidence felt forced, like he was trying to convince himself as much as me. I glanced at Mom, who was cutting her turkey too carefully, avoiding my eyes. Dad laughed at something my brother said, but it sounded hollow. The tension grew as the meal went on. Every time I tried to steer the conversation to something neutral, like my recent work project or a new restaurant in Boise, they brought it back to my life, my finances, my plans. "You must have a nice nest egg by now," my sister-in-law said, her voice casual but sharp. I brushed it off, saying I was careful with money, but the words felt heavy in my mouth. My brother leaned forward, his grin fading for a split second. "You're smart like that," he said, but it didn't sound like a compliment. It sounded like a calculation. I pushed my plate away, my appetite gone. The warmth of the meal, the familiar smells, couldn't mask the unease creeping up my spine. I thought about the text from Mom, how it had pulled me here despite my doubts. I'd wanted to believe in a family moment, but now, sitting at this table, I felt like a guest in a house I didn't know anymore. Their laughter, their questions, their glances, it all felt like a setup. I gripped my glass, trying to shake the thought, but it wouldn't leave. Whatever they wanted, it wasn't just a Thanksgiving dinner. After dinner, we moved to the living room for the gift exchange. The fireplace crackled, casting a warm glow, but the air felt heavy, like the tension from the table had followed us. Mom handed out the presents I'd brought: Dad's wine, her scarf, my sister-in-law's finance book, and they smiled, thanking me again, but their voices sounded rehearsed. My brother leaned back on the couch, his arm around his wife, watching me with a look I couldn't quite read. "Your turn," Mom said, her smile tight as she handed me a small, neatly wrapped box. I took it, expecting something simple, a trinket, maybe a family keepsake. My fingers fumbled with the ribbon and I forced a smile, trying to ignore the knot in my stomach. Inside the box was a single folded paper. I unfolded it, my eyes scanning the text, and my heart stopped. It was a bank notice, official and cold, stating my brother owed $250,000 for a failed startup. I stared at the numbers, my mind racing to make sense of it. "What is this?" I asked, my voice low, looking up at Mom. She glanced at Dad, who cleared his throat and leaned forward, his hands clasped. "It's your brother's debt," he said, his tone firm, like he was stating a fact I should already accept. "The business didn't work out. We need you to cover it." I blinked, the paper trembling in my hands. My brother's eyes were on me, unblinking, his grin gone. My sister-in-law shifted closer to him, her face calm but expectant. "You're doing so well," Christine, Mom said, her voice soft but sharp, like she was trying to soothe me into agreement. "You've always been the responsible one. This is for the family." I looked at her, then at Dad, then at my brother, waiting for someone to say this was a mistake. No one did. The room felt smaller, the air thicker, like I was being cornered. "How do you even know I can pay this?" I asked, my voice sharper now. My sister-in-law spoke up, her tone matter of fact. "I work at the bank. I saw you're saving $700,000. You can afford it." My stomach dropped. She'd accessed my account, my private finances, without my permission. The violation hit me like a punch. I'd spent years building that safety net, working late nights, skipping vacations, while my brother spent money on whatever he wanted. And now they were using my hard work against me, like it was theirs to claim. "This isn't fair," I said, my voice shaking with anger. "Why is this my problem?" My brother finally spoke, his voice smooth, but edged with frustration. "Come on, sis. It's just money. We're family. You can't let us lose everything." His words stung, not because they were true, but because they weren't. Family didn't mean this lying, scheming, digging into my life like I owed them. I looked at the bank notice again, the words "failed startup" glaring at me. I didn't believe it. My brother's history of bad deals and flashy purchases flashed through my mind, but I had no proof yet. Dad leaned closer, his face hardening. "You've got the means," he said. "You're sitting on all that money, and you're going to let your brother's life fall apart. What kind of daughter does that?" His words cut deep, but not because I felt guilty, because they confirmed what I'd always feared. They didn't see me as their daughter, not really. They saw me as a solution, a checkbook to fix their mistakes. Mom nodded, her eyes pleading but cold. "We're counting on you," she said. "This is what families do." I pushed the paper back into the box, my hands steady now despite the rage building inside. "No," I said, my voice clear. "I'm not paying this." The room went silent. My brother's jaw tightened, his eyes narrowing like I'd betrayed him. My sister-in-law's calm mask slipped, her lips pressing into a thin line. Mom's face fell, but there was something else there, anger, maybe, or desperation. Dad's hands clenched, his knuckles white. I could feel their disappointment, their judgment pressing down on me, but I held my ground. "You're being selfish?" My sister-in-law said, her voice low, almost a hiss. "You think you're better than us, don't you?" I wanted to scream, to tell her she had no right to my money, my life, but I didn't. I just stared back, my heart pounding, feeling the weight of their betrayal. They'd planned this, all of them, before I even walked through the door. The warm welcome, the dinner, the smiles, it was all a setup to trap me. I felt like a fool for hoping, for thinking this could be a real family moment. The box sat in my lap, heavy with their expectations, and I knew nothing would be the same after this. I pushed the box away, my voice firm. "I'm not paying his debt," I said, staring at Dad, daring him to argue. His face twisted, a flush creeping up his neck. Mom's hands clenched on the coffee table, her eyes narrowing like I'd betrayed her. My brother shot forward, his voice sharp. "You're really gonna let us lose everything?" He snapped, his charm gone, replaced by a raw edge of desperation. My sister-in-law crossed her arms, her glare cold and accusing. "You're supposed to help family," she said, her words dripping with judgment as if I'd broken some unspoken vow. I shook my head, the crumpled banknote still in my hand. "This is his mess," I said, pointing at my brother. "Why am I the one who has to clean it up?" My voice trembled, not from fear but from years of frustration boiling over. I'd always been the one to fix things, to step up when they needed me, but this was different. This was my brother's failure, not mine, and I was done carrying their weight. The silence that followed was heavy, their eyes boring into me, waiting for me to crack. Dad stood abruptly, his chair scraping the floor. He grabbed his wine glass, his knuckles white around the stem. "You ungrateful child!" he spat, his voice shaking with rage. Before I could move, he flung the wine at me. It splashed across my face, cold and sharp, stinging my eyes and soaking my shirt. The liquid dripped down my chin, pooling on the floor, and I stood frozen, the shock hitting me like a wave. My breath caught, my heart pounding as the reality sank in. My own father had done this in front of everyone without a hint of regret. Mom gasped, but her face hardened almost instantly. She stood, her voice icy. "If you won't help your brother, you're not welcome here," she said, each word cutting deeper than the wine. "Get out." I stared at her, my chest tight, waiting for her to take it back, to show some flicker of guilt. She didn't. My brother looked away, his jaw tight, refusing to meet my eyes. My sister-in-law's lips twitched into a faint smirk, like she'd expected this all along. Grandpa sat in the corner, his hands folded, watching silently, his face unreadable. The anger surged inside me, hot and unstoppable. "You're choosing him over me," I said, my voice low but steady, each word deliberate. "After everything I've done, this is how you treat me." I wiped the wine from my face, my sleeve now stained red, my hands trembling with fury. They'd planned this, manipulated me from the moment I walked in, and now they were throwing me out because I wouldn't give in. The betrayal burned deeper than I'd ever felt, but it also made something clear: I didn't owe them anything. I grabbed my coat from the chair, my movements sharp, deliberate. "You don't get to do this," I said, looking at Mom, then Dad, then my brother. "You don't get to guilt me into fixing his mistakes." My brother opened his mouth, but I cut him off. "No, I'm done." My voice was louder now, fueled by years of being overlooked, of being the one who always had to be responsible. My sister-in-law scoffed, muttering something about me being selfish, but I didn't care. Her words couldn't touch me anymore. I walked toward the door, my wet shirt clinging to my skin, the smell of wine sharp in my nose. Dad's face was still red, his hands clenched, but he didn't say a word. Mom stood rigid, her eyes cold, like I was a stranger. My brother stayed silent, his head bowed, avoiding my gaze. Grandpa's eyes followed me, but he didn't speak, not yet. I wanted to scream, to tell them how wrong they were, but I didn't. Words wouldn't change them. They'd made their choice, and I'd made mine. I stepped outside, the November air hitting my wet clothes, chilling me to the bone. My car was still in the driveway, right where I'd left it hours ago when I'd walked in, hoping for a family moment. That hope was gone now, replaced by a clarity I hadn't felt before. I wasn't their scapegoat anymore. I slid into the driver's seat, my hands gripping the wheel, my anger still burning but mixed with something else, relief. I didn't look back as I started the engine. This was the end of their hold on me. Grandpa rose to his feet, his voice slicing through the heavy silence. The living room, tense after my departure, seemed to shrink under his gaze. Dad sat rigid, fists still clenched. Mom kept her eyes fixed on the floor, avoiding him. My brother shifted uneasily while my sister-in-law sat stiff, her face pale. For most of the evening he had stayed quiet in the corner, just watching, but now his presence filled every inch of the room. "I've had enough," he said low but sharp. You think you can treat her like this and lie to everyone? His trembling hand pointed at Dad, then at my brother. That debt wasn't from a startup. It was from gambling in Nevada casinos, cars, trips to Europe. His words struck like a slap. Mom's head snapped up, her mouth open but speechless. Dad's face went pale, his jaw tight. My brother tried to speak, but the elder cut him off with blazing eyes. Don't you dare deny it. Slowly he paced across the floor, cane tapping against the wood. I saw the transactions in the family account. $250,000 gone. Casinos, a BMW, flights to Paris. And I heard you? He turned toward Dad, plotting with him to hide it, to trick Christine into paying. My sister-in-law's eyes widened, her hands twisting in her lap. She opened her mouth, but he silenced her with a raised hand. You knew too. You checked her savings and thought you could guilt her into fixing this mess. The accusation lingered, undeniable. Dad rose, his voice shaky. You don't understand. But the old man cut him short. I understand plenty, he snapped. You threw wine in her face, told her to leave her own home, all to cover his lies. He pointed at my brother, who shrank back, stripped of his usual bravado. Mom covered her face, shoulders trembling. My sister-in-law pressed her lips tight, no longer smirking. Their excuses collapsed under his fury. I raised you better than this, his voice broke. Christine's the only one who's been honest, and you treated her like dirt. His eyes softened for a moment, as if thinking of me. She deserves to know the truth. With deliberate fingers, he pulled out his phone and dialed my number. The room froze in silence as he waited. Halfway back to Boise, my phone rang. Seeing his name, I pulled over, my heart pounding. Christine, he said, voice heavy but steady. You need to know what your brother really did. He told me everything, how the debt wasn't from a startup but from gambling, how the money went to casinos, a BMW, and luxury trips. He explained how he had seen the family account transactions and overheard Dad and my brother scheming to force me to pay. My hands gripped the wheel, anger flaring but sharpened by clarity. They lied to you. Grandpa's voice softened. Your sister-in-law checked your savings. They all thought they could manipulate you. I closed my eyes, betrayal cutting deeper than ever. I had doubted my brother's story, but hearing it laid out, the casinos, the lies, their plan to use me, made my stomach churn. His anger mirrored mine, steadying me. I couldn't let them get away with it, he said. Not after what they did to you. I whispered my thanks before hanging up. The road stretched ahead, dark and empty, but my thoughts burned. They had planned to ruin me, to take everything I'd built. Dad's wine, Mom's cold words, my brother's silence, it all made sense now. They weren't just desperate. They were deceitful, ready to sacrifice me to save themselves. Back in Boise, I threw myself into my routine. My apartment small, but mine became my sanctuary. I focused on work, long hours at the office where I'd earned every cent of my savings. I started running again, the cold air clearing my head with every step. I didn't need their approval anymore, didn't need their expectations dragging me down. For the first time in years, I felt light, like I'd shed a burden I'd carried too long. I wasn't the dutiful daughter or the responsible sister anymore. I was just me, and that was enough. Word about what happened spread fast. Grandpa didn't hold back after that night. He told Aunt Martha and Uncle Stephen, Mom's sister and brother-in-law, the whole story, how my brother's debt came from casinos in Nevada, not some failed startup. How Dad and Mom tried to cover it up. How they turned on me when I refused to pay. Aunt Martha called me a week later, her voice soft but firm. We're on your side, she said. What they did was wrong. Uncle Stephen, usually quiet, sent a text. You don't deserve that. Their support wasn't loud, but it was steady. A reminder that not everyone in the family had betrayed me. In Idaho Falls, things unraveled for them. My brother couldn't dodge the bank forever. The $250,000 he owed wasn't going away, and with no one to bail him out, he had to face it. He and my sister-in-law sold their house, a big flashy place they'd bought to show off. I heard from Aunt Martha that it went for less than they hoped, barely enough to cover the debt. They moved into a small apartment on the edge of town, a far cry from the life they'd flaunted. My brother's charm didn't work anymore. People in town whispered about his gambling, his recklessness. My sister-in-law kept her job at the bank, but her reputation took a hit. No one trusted someone who'd pried into private accounts to manipulate family. Dad and Mom didn't fare much better. They'd always been pillars in their community, church events, charity drives, the works. But word got out, as it always does in small towns. Neighbors stopped inviting them to gatherings. Friends grew distant, their smiles polite but cold. Aunt Martha told me Mom tried to explain it away at a book club, claiming it was all a misunderstanding, but no one bought it. The truth was too ugly. They'd chosen to protect my brother's lies over their own daughter. Uncle Stephen, who'd always been close to Dad, stopped visiting. He didn't say why, but the reason was clear. They'd crossed a line, and the community they'd leaned on for years turned its back. I didn't gloat. I didn't want to. Knowing they were paying for what they did didn't erase the hurt, but it gave me closure. I'd spent years trying to hold the family together, always the one to compromise, to forgive. But that night in Idaho Falls changed everything. They'd shown who they really were, and I wasn't going to let them pull me back into their mess. I stopped checking my email for apologies that never came. I stopped waiting for them to change. Grandpa was the only one I kept in touch with, his calls, a quiet comfort. He didn't push, didn't preach. Just asked how. I was told me he was proud. Boise became my home in a way it hadn't before. I joined a running group. Made a few friends who didn't know my family's story, didn't need to. Work kept me busy, but it was more than that. I was building something for myself, something they couldn't touch. I opened a new savings account, one my sister-in-law would never see. Every deposit felt like a step forward, a brick in the wall I was building around my life. I wasn't rich, but I was secure, and that was mine to keep. Sometimes late at night, I'd think about them, Dad's angry glare, Mom's cold words, my brother's silence. The memories stung, but they didn't control me anymore. I'd spent so long trying to be what they wanted, but now I was free to be what I wanted. I didn't need their house, their approval, or their lies. I had my own life, my own strength, and that was enough. Months passed in Boise, my days calm. I'd settled into a rhythm that felt like mine alone. No calls from Mom, no texts from Dad, no pleas from my brother. The silence was deliberate, a wall I'd built to protect myself. My apartment, with its familiar creaks and warm light, was my refuge. I'd wake early, run along the Boise River, the steady beat of my steps grounding me. Work filled my hours, each project a step toward a future I controlled. I wasn't running from the past. I was building beyond it. Grandpa was the only one I still talked to. His calls came every few weeks, his voice steady, asking about my day or sharing small updates. He never pushed me to forgive or forget, and I respected him for that. Aunt Martha and Uncle Stephen checked in too, their messages brief but kind, a quiet reminder of the family I hadn't lost. But Mom, Dad, my brother, my sister-in-law, they were gone from my life. I didn't check their social media, didn't ask about them. The hurt they'd caused was a closed chapter, one I had no interest in reopening. Looking back, I realized how much I'd learned. Family isn't a debt you owe forever. Sometimes the people closest to you can hurt you the most, not because they're evil, but because they're flawed, caught in their own mistakes. I used to think love meant saying yes to every demand, fixing every problem. But that night in Idaho Falls taught me something different. Setting boundaries isn't selfish, it's survival. Walking away from my family's lies, their pressure, their betrayal was the hardest thing I'd ever done. It was also the strongest. I'm proud of the life I've built. My savings are mine, earned through years of discipline. My friends, my routines, my choices, they're mine too. I don't carry the weight of my brother's debt or my parents' expectations anymore. I've learned to protect my peace, to value myself even when others don't. It's not about cutting people out to punish them. It's about choosing who gets to share your space, your energy. If you're watching this, think about your own boundaries. Maybe you're facing pressure from family, feeling guilt for saying no. Ask yourself, are they respecting you or are they using you? You don't have to carry their burdens to prove your love. Stand up for yourself even if it's hard, even if it means walking away. You're worth it.